Hello, friends. I hope this finds you well and not too engaged in your thoughts, if possible, because that's what I would like to talk about today. Why you should not believe your thoughts. And I think I've seen, you probably have too, seen little post notes or something that says, don't believe everything your mind tells you, or don't believe any of your thoughts. And that is fun to have it as a little meme. But to make that a reality, that's kind of a whole new thing. And that takes some effort and some deeper introspection, I would say. When I was in India, I think it was my first time in India in 2005, was it? I went to the Oneness University in India to be initiated to give the Diksha blessing, and I remember Bhagavan, the teacher, the guru there. He would often say, "Your thoughts are not yours, or your thoughts are not your thoughts, and your emotions are not yours, not your emotion, and yourself." I think he said something is just a figment of the mind, something to that extent. So today I want to go into that a little deeper about the thoughts, that your thoughts are not yours. And that's why inviting you to not believe every thought that comes through your mind is simply because they're not yours. they're just all these hypnotic suggestions that I have talked about. That's a term I got from Joe Goldsmith, that they're simply hypnotic suggestions. That's all they are. They're not yours. They're not mine. They're not really anybody's in reality. They are part of that veil of illusion, the simulation, the matrix. They are being projected into our minds, but they're not ours. And as long as we keep being identified with this separate sense of self, because it's the separate sense of self that is really identified with these thoughts. It's like the separate sense of self, or the ego, not like that is a bad thing, but it's totally dependent on your thoughts, on your five senses. It's like the matrix is kind of like this five sense mind projection into our experience. And as long as we are not aware of that, we just buy into it unquestioned. We just believe it immediately. There's like no filter to pause it and then let me just see if that's really true. So for me back then, it was very helpful to have that as a maybe another truth or a reality that they're not mine. And I want to offer that to you in case that is helpful for you, that all these thoughts that we're being bombarded with, and I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like the bombardment is so much more than it was back in 2005 when I was in India. And I was already on my path before that. But it seems like this external hypnotic suggestion, it's just gone totally over the top. And it's disturbing for most of us, to say the least. It's almost like it's hard to, make a space, create a gap between who we are and then this bombardment before it just enters us and we buy into it and then we believe it. And since it is coming from the matrix, and the matrix is just, it's a false reality, it's an overlay, it's kind of a simulation. When you start seeing through it, you realize that it's nothing. They really are suggestions, but they're very tenacious. They're not just giving up when you say no, not interested. Maybe they'll, for a while. And we need to keep that up, to just not let that overcrowd us, and let it fill our experience and reality up as if that is the truth. So how do we do that? Well, I would say the first thing to really take in is that these thoughts are not yours. Let's just take that in for a moment. It's another thought, right? But maybe this is a thought that can help us get out of the thinking. And I remember Joe Goldsmith, he would say we can use the mind to educate ourselves out of the mind. And I always thought that was brilliant, because we can use the mind for something that is helpful, for something productive. So if I may offer this thought to the mind, say, these thoughts that are bombarding you and filling you up from morning to night, they're not yours. They are not yours, and they're not mine. I'm going to take a deep breath. And I don't just want to say things as a mental, words. I want to create a space for us all to just feel that, and see how that is received in the body. So notice what happens in you when I say, those thoughts, those crazy thoughts, that onslaught of thoughts. They're not yours. They're not yours. They're not personal. They're not personal to you. They're actually impersonal. So that means they don't have a person. They don't have a you or I that makes them personal. They're impersonal. The way they become seemingly personal is when we do that, when we say, oh, these thoughts, those are mine, and they're telling me something that is true about myself. And that's when we make them personal. But that does not make them personal. That is our engagement in them and acceptance of them. And then, of course, we take off on a journey of, a hell ride, pain, suffering, fear, anxiety, trying to overcome them, do therapy, all these things. But they're not ours, they're not yours. So I think I want to really offer that as an alternative to making them personal, and just see what happens. I think that's the entry door into these thoughts are not yours. So what happens in your body? Is it a relief? Do you feel a deep breath? Notice what happens, because this is your truth speaking to you with a very different language. When you feel a relief, then it's because your body is saying, oh, thank goodness. It's like it knows that, but it just needed somebody to remind you, remind me. And what happens then? If you can let yourself sink into your body, into that sense of relief, it's almost like you create a gap, or a gap is created. It's like you have this belief that these thoughts are mine, and I'm telling you, these thoughts are not yours. And then there's a gap, and you go, Oh, really? And it's like you let go of that. It's not, it was personal here, but now you can see, oh, they're not mine. They're impersonal. So now you're here without that clutch. Now, in that gap, you can be curious about, well, who am I then? What am I then if I'm not this? And we need to keep this gap open for a long time, consistently, daily, hourly, whatever, because it wants to keep coming in. So it's not just a one time. The matrix is here and we live in it. The matrix is all these hypnotic suggestions. But the more we spend time being curious about, well, what am I then? This gets stronger. And you go like, oh, I'm this. Then you start being curious about, that age-old question, that age-old spiritual question, who am I? What am I? And that is the question we need to keep asking ourselves. If I'm not my thoughts, I'm still here. There's still something here. But it doesn't have all these, I'm Pernilla, I'm a this, I'm a that, I have these beliefs, I'm bad, I'm terrible, I'm blah, blah, blah. When I'm not hooking into that, there's still something left, right? You're still here. You're here without this. This is doing its thing here, but it's not connected to you now because it was impersonal. And it's going to come in and say, hey, you want to come for another ride with me? But now you're beginning to get so much presence and embodiment or curiosity, introspection, abidance in this, who you are. And the more strong this gets, the weaker this gets because you're not feeding it. This needs you and I to stay alive. So when we're not feeding it, it's probably going to go to somebody else where it can get a good feed, but not from you, unless you're not paying attention. It's going to creep in the back door, the front door, or the window. And if we don't catch it, we latch onto it again. And there's suddenly that feeling of like, I feel awful. I'm just not good enough. And people just don't like me. You know them, right? That's this thing here. That's the matrix that wants us to hook in, believe it, and then it gets this feed out of us. And we feel terrible. We feel depleted, we feel fatigued, we feel upset. And the more we feel upset and angry and sad, the more this is being fed. And now it's getting like, oh my God, I'm feeling strong. Now she's easy to get a suck out of. It's funny that I have never done this with the hands, and I'm watching myself on the video here. And this is what's happening right now, and it's showing me in a new way what I knew in a different way. So this gets stronger now. So that means you have more resilience. It's easier to say no to that, even if it comes in the other back doors or whatever. You start noticing it's like, oh, here's that yucky feeling. Here's that suggestion that wants to suck my energy. And the more we spend time here, it's going to kind of get stronger. It's like a muscle, right? We exercise this muscle every day, many times a day, by being present with it, by listening to it, by letting it tell us who and what we are. You see, it's a very different way. It's coming from within. There's a feeling of like, oh, I feel myself. There's like a sense of joy or a sense of peace or sense of presence, clarity. Can be anything, but it's coming from inside. It's not coming here as these negative suggestions. So you start paying attention to this. And then it starts informing us. It starts informing us who we are as this I that we are at the core. And then the more we do that, it becomes more familiar. It becomes easier to connect with. And then we rest in it. We instead of, kind of abiding in these suggestions, we abide in the core of our being. And we start exuding a very different energy. And you can probably feel it. When some people really abide deeply here all the time, you can feel there's kind of some sense of an aura or radiance, an energy, a sense of something, and it feels nice to be around them. This is your own truth. This is your own frequency, which is, of course, your divine frequency, your connection to source. And yours may be very different than the person over here or here. It's still the same, but it has different flavors. Some can be very peaceful, some can be very clear, very strong, but it comes from a purity. It's not coming from these hypnotic suggestions in the mind. So that's why I'm offering today, that suggestion. I'm suggesting to you that maybe these thoughts are not yours, but it is up to you to explore that. That I can't do for you. I can do it with you. If you wanted to do some of this work with me, you can join me. You can sign up for a discovery session and we can connect and see if it's worth doing some work together. But I can't do it for you, and nobody can do it for us. We need to do the work. It's easier if you are in some kind of a presence where that is already more alive, because then that connects with your presence. And then you might be able to recognize it easier than when you're doing it on your own. If you have done this work on your own and you're familiar with it, you can probably do it on your own. And I think that's great. If this is new to you, you may need some assistance in the beginning, and that's perfectly normal. But the bottom line is, are you curious to investigate or examine if these thoughts are yours? And if they're not, who would you be without those thoughts? And that's actually, as I say, that's a Byron Katie statement. Who would you be without these thoughts? And that's, of course, what she's referring to. So this is my invitation for you to explore within yourself. Is it really true? That are these thoughts really mine? And should I believe every thought that comes knocking at my door saying, hey, you want to go for a ride? Come on, I'll take you to Timbuktu, and you can just leave yourself miles and miles away, but you can always come back in one instant. And that's when you realize, this is not me. I'm not even interested. I want to come back here. And maybe starting with taking a nice deep breath is a nice way to come back to yourself, all the way down. And then you can start again. Okay, so I'm here. What am I? Who am I? What is here without these suggestions?